Alright guys, finally got a beautiful weather day to go ahead and get the fenders cut on the driver's side of the truck. I already did the passenger side, which I'll show you in just a second, but today I'm going to show you the entire process. I will be cutting my fender flares and the metal fender beneath. I know some people choose not to run the flares, but I'm going to rock mine because, and I'll show this to you when I remove the actual flares, when they vinyl wrap my truck, they sort of like looped it in between all the plugs back there, so it's gonna look like crap if I don't run the flares. So that's why I'm still running them. So you'll see all that. And not only will I show you how to cut these and get them trimmed properly, I'll show you how to attach them so they are nice and secure afterwards, because depending on how much you cut out of here, you lose a lot of the support both in the front and the back. What's going on, guys? I'm actually editing the fender cutting video right now, and I think it's just gonna be too long. It's easily gonna be over 20 minutes. So the video you'll see today is just going to be cutting the fenders. I will upload a follow-up video tomorrow showing you how to re-secure them after they're cut, just for the sake of not having one giant long video. So let's get back to it. So here is the passenger side. They are trimmed. I'm not running any edge guard or anything. On the passenger side, I took 1.5 inches out of the fender flare, the plastic part on the outside, and then 2 inches out of the fender, just so I like having the fender a little higher, so you don't actually see it back here. But I think on the driver's side, I'm going to add 1/2 inch to the front, because I don't know if this is going to come up on camera, but there is a natural like fold or bend line in the fender flare. You can see it right there. That's 1/2 inch taller. It doesn't really bother me, but you can sort of see it, so I would prefer to have my cut line like right on that fold. So I'm just going to add a little bit to the driver's side over here. You'll need to decide exactly how much you want to cut out. I'm doing this specifically to fit 35s. You could also want to cut these just for looks. It sort of gives you the illusion of more lift when you have more gap right there. But like I mentioned, I'm doing this specifically for 35s, so when they're stuffed up in there, they're not going to rub on this and the metal fender in there and sort of chew them up and get all nasty. Now, I was looking around, the sweet spot for trimming usually seems to be between 2.5 and 3 inches. However, since I do have that 1 inch body lift, that is pretty much already giving me 1 inch right there, so I'm doing mine a little less, like I mentioned. For the front driver's side, I'm gonna go ahead and do the fender flare 2 inches up and the actual metal fender behind it, 2.5. And in the back, I'm just doing 1 inch on the fender flare and 1.5 inches on the metal fender behind it. And I'll show you the way I'm gonna mark these. I'm gonna just do like one starter mark, measuring up with my tape right there. Then take the marker and the measuring tape and just sort of trace a line real quick around it, like bracing my finger on the bottom. It's sort of difficult to explain. You'll see it though. This doesn't have to be perfect, and you can always like trim it up a little more later, sort of fine tune it, but I'll get this marked and show you how it goes. And I'm not sure if it's going to show up because of the sun glare. There's my 2 inch starter mark roughly in the middle. I'll sort of trace this out towards the front and then the same thing towards the back. Putting a marker on it like this and then bracing my finger, I'm just going to slide it along the fender. Do it relatively quick so it's easier to just maintain that gap. And then the same thing going towards the back. If you get little spots like this where it sort of slipped a little, don't worry. You can obviously see it's bent up that way. You can just trace in that line. All right, guys, got my cut line marked on the fender flare. Next thing is to just pop these off. I have a video showing you how to do this already. Check it out right there. All right, guys, got both front and back fender flares pulled off, saved all the hardware. Now, this will be filthy when you take it off. All kinds of dirt and stuff you can see will fall on your tires. So don't have your face like right here. If it's windy out, it'll blow right up into your face. So went ahead and just wiped that down with a wet paper towel. I'll clean it a little later after I get to cutting, but just wanted to show you my truck is black underneath in case you are a new subscriber. This is just a vinyl wrap. And here's what I was mentioning earlier, how they wrapped it. Obviously, I would have preferred if they just took out all the plugs and wrapped the whole thing, but they sort of looped it down, which at the time I was planning on running the fender flares forever, so oh well. Don't really feel like just having all 4 fenders rewrapped, since that would pretty much be like wrapping half the truck just to be able to not run the fender flares, so it is what it is. One quick thing to mention, if you do plan on reusing your fender flares after you cut them, it's sort of 50-50 whether or not you're going to break any of these clips. There are blue and orange ones that are oriented in a certain way, so just go ahead and grab one of these packs on Amazon. They're like 10 bucks. It's one clip for all of your fenders, so one of these little packets for 10 bucks will will cover the whole truck. I'll put a link for this into the description. Up here on the front, all the clips that are still good, I left in an orange up front, so these are all good. This one came out, and sometimes they'll snap like this one snapped right here. They look like I guess like an inverted mushroom if they are still good. So I got to replace that one and the bottom orange one. So that one wasn't too bad, just a few, but on the back one, these are all broken. I think the only one that is still good, yeah, is this bottom blue one. And it's still kind of loose, so I might replace it. There's like a rubber washer on the back that helps keep it tight. So I'll probably just replace all of those. I like to go ahead and do this like one at a time. Like I said, you can see they're blue and orange and they'll only fit a certain way. I'll just replace them one at a time. They sort of pop in one way and you twist them either clockwise or counterclockwise to get them tight, just so those are ready since I am reusing my fender flares. Okay, got all of the clips replaced except for these two orange ones right here and right there, and you can pinch these from the back if they're being stubborn, but the fender liner is back here blocking my hand, so that brings up the next point. Now, I am not going to be rerunning the fender liner in the back or the front. I mean, I haven't had it in the front of my truck for, God, probably over a year, so you'll have to make the decision if you want to run your rear fender liner. I mean, it seems pretty worthless to me. It's a little splash guard, I guess, but mud gets everywhere anyway. I will be removing it using one of these plastic trim removal tools. There's just a bunch of plastic clips all along the inside of the fender, and I think maybe a few up top, but if you do plan on reusing this, you're going to have to be super careful because it is very easy to break these things. There might be some kind of tool. There's like a square opening in it, if you can see that on the camera. Maybe it'll twist out, I'm not sure. I'm not too worried about it because, like I said, I'm just going to be pulling this whole thing down anyway. Because my fender liner anyway, like when I close my doors, I put like foam pad down here. Sometimes this will like rub and like vibrate. Like you can hear like that every time I close my doors, and it drives me crazy anyway, so that'll be one less vibration removed. So I'm gonna go ahead and pop all these off with the tool. This is super useful to have for this kind of stuff, and get that out of the way so I can pinch the back of those last two attachments and get those out of the way. The first few plastic clips for the fender liner removed back here. This plastic is very brittle. You can see right here it's sort of getting eaten up as I try to pry it loose. So if you do want to reuse the liner, I just recommend ordering some. I'm not sure what the part number is. I was able to get one out of 4 so far without breaking it, but that is what it looks like. Got to be on the Toyota website. OEM plastic, probably $5 a piece. And now that the fender flares are actually off, I'm getting ready to tape up the actual metal on the fender and then going ahead and marking that line, just like I did for the fender flares. Just remember, give yourself whatever you're going to cut to on the fender flares, the plastic outside part, if you're rerunning those. Just give yourself an extra ½ inch on top of that for your line, for your cut line, just to sort of tuck the actual metal of the fender up in there just a little bit to give yourself just a little bit of an insurance policy so that metal's not going to be chewing up the tire in case you miscalculated. So I'll go ahead and get that done for the front and the back. And one quick thing I almost forgot to mention before you get the rear fender taped up, this obviously doesn't apply to the front. I will be reusing these support brackets. There's one right here in the front of the rear fender and the other one right here towards the back. So I'm gonna go ahead and remove those. Yeah, it will make the fender like shake a little bit more when I'm cutting it, but since where they currently attach is right in the line of where I'm gonna cut, I don't want the blade on my jigsaw to hit that. And I'll be reusing these. I'll show you how to make them work. So just a few 10mm bolts for each one and get those out of the way. All right, almost got those support brackets off. Some of the bolts snapped, some didn't. You can see right here, no biggie. I'll just be replacing all this anyway with stainless steel hardware. So don't worry if you break some of the bolts off because they're pretty much exposed to like salt and stuff if you live in one of the northern states. Just wanted to show you this second bolt right here that holds this front support bracket on. The neck of where your gas goes into the gas tank is directly in the way, but if you loosen it off of this bracket right here, which is just a 12mm bolt, it gives you a little play in there to get like a stubby ratchet or socket in there. It's still a pain in the ass, but just take your time and you'll get it. Obviously don't put too much pressure on the fuel neck so you risk breaking that. Since I am reusing these, I do have one broken bolt to drill out on each one, no big deal, and I'll go ahead and brush off some surface rust you can see right here and get a fresh coat of Rust-Oleum rust paint on here, I guess flat black, just to clean it up a little bit. So don't have to do that obviously, but while it's off, might as well give it a fresh coat of paint. Alright guys, as far as actually cutting the fender flares and the metal on the fender, you have a few options, of course, depending on what tools you have. You could, of course, use a cutoff wheel, a Dremel with a smaller cutting bit, like a mini version of the cutoff wheel, or a jigsaw with a nice metal cutting bit. Now this is up to you. I use these two right here and it worked perfectly. Recommend the Dremel on the plastic fender flare. You just have a lot more control. And the jigsaw on the actual metal of the fender with a nice quality metal cutting bit, meaning a bit specifically designed to cut steel. This bit's brand new. As you will see in just a minute, it will eat through the fender like butter and it's very easy to control. I guess you could also use a Sawzall with a metal cutting bit, but that's probably just going to be like a more difficult version of this to control when you're cutting. So I'm going to go ahead and recommend the Dremel and the jigsaw. Of course, what you pick is up to you. Alright guys, I will be starting with the front plastic fender flare. I'm just going to use my Dremel with the cutoff wheel to go along my line. If you're doing this, don't be paranoid about getting it perfect. It is very easy to correct any line inconsistencies if you're going for like a steady line with the same width all the way across. So just get it cut and then you can always adjust later. So I'm going to cut the front first and then flip it over. And you can see I will be losing all of these brackets, but don't worry, I'll show you how to adjust that to make this nice and secure a little later in the video. And at this point, the main piece I'm trimming off is mostly loose. I'll just go through and make sure the cutoff wheel went all the way through on my line, and then get down here where it sort of folds over on either side, and then of course flip it over and address all those attachment points. And here's the back. Just cut off that piece, of course, and all three of the foam, like sort of spacer pads that help keep this from shaking around, are still attached. If you're cutting higher, you might need to like take these off and trim them separately and then maybe Gorilla Glue them back on, because these do help stabilize the fender, but all of mine are still nice and secure. So now we're just going to flip this over. I'm going to go ahead and take off all the blue tape and then get to work cleaning up all of these, like the melted plastic. It cools off pretty quickly and then you can literally just tear off the big pieces, but I'll get like a metal file and smooth that line off. And now getting ready to do the rear fender flare. Follow the same steps. This is exactly the same, it's just a little bit bigger, so take your time, you'll get through it. Alright guys, and now for the fun part I'm sure you've all been waiting for, getting ready to actually cut the metal of the fenders. You can see I have it taped up, got my line marked, and I will be using a jigsaw like I mentioned before, and I put some blue tape on the bottom of that just to help it slide over the tape surface a little bit. Now I did check. Again, I'm running a 1-inch body lift, so that eliminates 1 inch that I would have cut. Otherwise, I probably would have gone up another inch up here. I checked with my jigsaw where I have my line, and my jigsaw will clear all of these attachment points for the fender flares. If you guys are cutting higher, you might have to go ahead and leave those removed when you're actually cutting with the jigsaw. Otherwise, this is going to hit that up there, so just keep that in mind. The way I'll be cutting this, I'm not going to start like a pilot hole or anything. I'm just going to start over here and sort of do a swoop in cut to get on the line and finish down this way. I'll probably get to within like a 1/2 inch or 1 inch of the end and finish that off with the Dremel, because that folds under over there, you can see. And then once that piece is removed, go ahead and do another swooping cut in this way, and again stopping about 1/2 inch or 1 inch from the bottom and finishing that off with the Dremel. And aside from just kicking a little bit at the very beginning because I was sort of trying to go in at an angle, just make sure you're holding it tight. It went through relatively smoothly. Just make sure you're holding it tight against your line when you have to like reposition your feet to like shuffle forward. So you stay on that line, go slow. Make sure you plan ahead for any turns because it's kind of hard to turn sharply. So just sort of like driving a big rig, I guess, just plan ahead for those turns so you don't get off your line too much. I'm gonna wait to do this. I'm gonna go ahead and get this whole piece removed so I don't have to worry about this flopping around, and hit the Dremel on the bottom here. And after I looked at it, the reason that kicked to begin with was because one of the attachment tabs, this metal sticking out right here, was right where I started. So if I was just like an inch forward over here, that would not have kicked at all. So just keep that in mind. And I am going to get in with like a little deburring bit just to clean up the line. But look, this is just with the jigsaw blade. Hopefully that's going to come up on camera. Got a few little sharp pieces right here. And obviously this whole thing is very sharp. It'll cut you in no time flat. But that is a nice sharp line. And I think I did a pretty good job keeping true to the measurement there. I can get out of the way so the sun's sort of hitting it. Line looks good. Looks like it bows in just a little bit over here, but I can always like sand that down, but not too worried about it. It's really like up here since the tire is just going to go straight up. It's not going over here. And again, this is the fender behind the fender flare, so that's all going to be hidden anyway, so I guess I'll just leave it after I get it cleaned up. And now I'm just going to use one of my deburring bits here on my Dremel to smooth this up so it's not sharp, flat, and then sort of angled on both sides, and then get some touch-up paint on here. Since that is exposed metal, that will rust in no time. Now I'm not going to film it, but here is just some regular flat black paint since my truck is black. Not like it really matters. This is all going to be hidden anyway, just to cover up that bare metal so it doesn't rust. Do yourself a favor and have a brand new one of these. When I did this on the passenger side, I was trying to use an old one, and the paint in here was so gummy, it was just driving me crazy. So get a new one so the paint goes on quickly, because it's not a lot of surface area, but it is a long line, and just painting it on with this tiny brush can take a little while. And just like with the front, I'm going to use that deburring bit to smooth this out, but the first initial cut just with the jigsaw, and of course the cutoff wheel towards the bottom there, pretty smooth, very pleased with it, and you can see it's definitely a little loose. I mean, I don't know if this would drive you crazy if you're driving down on the road, but I will go ahead and get the reinforcement points reattached in just a little bit too. And just a quick shot of the bottom corners here towards the front and the rear before I get paint on the fender right here. And I'm thinking, I didn't do this on the other side, but I'm thinking when I actually clean up the edges where I cut on the plastic fender flares, I'm gonna install the fender flares and do it that way. That way they're held, because otherwise, if you haven't never taken your fender flares off, they are very floppy when they're not attached to the truck, so it'll be a lot easier that way. So get to that in just a sec. All right guys, still got to clean up that edge just a little bit, but there is the rear, and I'm going to go ahead and take the front fender flare, pop it on the front fender, and get to making sure that one is secure. Okay guys, I did not film it because it's the exact same process like I did on the metal of the fender, but I smoothed off the plastic of both the fender flares, front and back. Got it as smooth as possible. Now, if you did not know, my fender flares are actually wrapped in a satin black vinyl, so there's a little bit of threading, but I mean, if you're a few feet back, you can't really tell, so it doesn't really bother me. However, I am going to keep it... Make some more noise, please. I am going to keep an eye on it in case it starts to like peel up. They have this special stuff. I have some, it's inside, I can't remember what it's called. It's pretty much like vinyl finishing tape where you wrap it over where the vinyl terminates, and then in this case, like start here, maybe a 1/4 inch, and wrap it over and under just to keep that from peeling. So I'll keep an eye on that, but if yours aren't vinyl wrapped, shouldn't be an issue. Of course, you could always run the edge guard. I've seen plenty of people run. I'll put a link for that in the description below. I'm steering away from that for the actual metal fenders because a buddy of mine ran it on his Tacoma, and he said it pretty much just trapped water in there, making it like a potential area for rust. But there is the finished look for the cut fenders. Comment below, let me know what you think of the process, if you plan on doing it yourself, and how much you're going to cut out of your truck. All right guys, that will do it for this video. Yes, it was a long one, but hopefully you learned a thing or two and are more confident if you plan on tackling your fender cutting yourself. As always, thank you so much for supporting the channel by watching this video. If you want to help the channel grow, make sure you share it with your friends on social media. And don't forget to check out the follow-up video I will release tomorrow showing you how to actually secure the fender flares. Enjoy the rest of your week, and I'll see you in the next video.